Welcome back, and now for the news in detail. We start from Afghanistan, where an insider attack has claimed the lives of 23 security personnel in the eastern Ghazni province. Government officials say 7 security officers opened fire on their colleagues on a checkpoint in the Karabakh district. Officials say 2 officers were wounded in the attack. The Taliban have claimed the responsibility for the incident. The bloodshed comes a day after US envoy for Afghanistan, Zalmay Khalilzad, announced a pause in talks with the Taliban. Khalilzad said the talks are halted for the Taliban to consult their leadership about Washington's concerns over repeated attacks by them. In India, the opposition Congress Party workers rally in New Delhi to protest against the Citizenship Act, which grants nationality to only non-Muslim immigrants. Addressing the rally, Congress leader Sonia Gandhi said the new act will shred the soul of India. The rally has been organized as an awareness program calling the country a failed economy. Dubbed as Save India, the rally hosted all senior Congress Party leaders. Gandhi said there is an emergency-like situation in the country as protests over the act have brought normal life to a standstill in northeastern India. Police have shot at 3 protesters and wounded several others during clashes in Assam earlier this week.
The environment today is such that they make or remove any law or article in the Constitution, change the status of federal states, they remove or enact President's rule any time they like and pass any bill they like without any discussion. They pretend to celebrate Constitution Day and make a mockery of our Constitution every day.
The US has expressed concern over the implications of India's controversial citizenship bill. US envoy for religious freedom Sam Brownback says New Delhi should abide by its commitment to protect minorities' rights. Brownback's statement comes days before next week's ministerial meeting between India and the US. Meanwhile, violent protests against the bill have spread to West Bengal and Uttar Pradesh. There were protests in sites across Kolkata, bringing traffic to a standstill. Mass protest rallies were carried out in Hora, Murshidabad, Birbhum, parts of Burdwan and North Bengal. The agitators are rallying against a controversial act which gives citizenship to minorities from neighboring countries but not Muslims. Earlier, the UN's Human Rights Office also condemned India's Citizenship Act. It said the act is discriminatory in nature as it doesn't extend protection to Muslims. India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi has stumbled on the steps of Ganga Ghat in Kanpur. He was immediately helped to his feet by his security officials. Prime Minister Modi was on a visit to Kanpur to review the development projects. A delegation of Canada's Friends of Kashmir Committee visited Azad Jammu and Kashmir to meet refugee families who fled violence in the occupied valley. This comes as occupied Kashmir continues to suffer under India's curfew and communications blackout. More in this report.
Friends of Kashmir Canada has actively highlighted the plight of the Kashmiri people for nearly 30 years. On this visit, the group met with Pakistani officials and the president of Azad Jammu and Kashmir to discuss the situation in the valley.
We feel that Canada, as a country that respects human rights, that is concerned about human dignity, ought to be taking a much more forthright stand.
The committee members said it is the civil society's duty to pressurize their government to follow international law.
The international community has an obligation under international law, and even under our own domestic law, we have the Special Economic Measures Act, which says that aside from the UN putting sanctions on different countries, Canada can additionally put sanctions on countries which maybe the UN does not.
There is a movement called BDS, boycotts, divestments, and sanctions. Basically, these are tools, non-violent tools, that ordinary people can use when their own government isn't doing its job and isn't following international law.
The delegation aims to keep the Kashmir issue alive and urge the Canadian government, as well as the international community at large, to fulfill their commitment to human rights. Reporting for Indus News, Manahil Ahmed, Islamabad.
Pakistan's Prime Minister Imran Khan has arrived in Saudi Arabia on a one-day visit. He was received by Deputy Governor of Medina and Consul General of Pakistan in Jeddah, Khalid Majid. Prime Minister Khan paid his respects at the Holy Prophet's grave and offered prayers at Masjid-e-Nabawi. Later, he departed for Riyadh on official business. The trip comes on the heels of a whirlwind tour of Foreign Minister Shah Mahmood Qureshi, who visited Riyadh prior to the Premier's arrival. Pakistan's Army Chief General Qamar Javed Bajwa has called on Abu Dhabi's Crown Prince Sheikh Mohammed bin Zayed Al Nahyan. In a tweet, Pakistan's military spokesperson said the two discussed ways to enhance cooperation and coordination between the two countries. The two sides also exchanged views on the latest regional and international developments and matters of mutual concern. Refuting Indian allegations about minority rights in Pakistan, Foreign Ministry spokesperson Mohammad Faisal says the white in Pakistan's flag represents the country's minorities. Faisal was referring to claims by Indian politicians that Pakistan's non-Muslim population shrunk by 23% in 1947 to 3.72% today. Citing independent research, he said the apparent reduction in the non-Muslim population was because of formation of Bangladesh. Faisal termed Indian propaganda regarding Pakistan's demographics baseless, malicious and inaccurate. UK-based travel magazine Condé Traveller lists Pakistan as the top holiday destination for 2020. Owing to its beautiful landscapes, the magazine terms Pakistan a must-visit country. It highlights Pakistan's landscapes featuring towering mountains and green spaces in the north. The magazine said Pakistan is an almost magnetic spot for adventure travelers and intrepid hikers. The magazine also credits the Duke and Duchess of Cambridge's visit to Pakistan for putting the country back into the spotlight. Earlier, Forbes magazine named Pakistan as one of the 10 coolest countries to visit in 2019. It recommended travelers explore the valleys of Hunza, Shigar and Kaplu via the renowned Karakoram Highway. North Korea's top military official says the US must refrain from provoking Pyongyang if it wants to see a peaceful new year. The statement came hours after North Korea conducted a second test at the Sohae satellite launch site. Chief of the General Staff Park Jong-cheon said the recent tests are aimed at subduing nuclear threats from Washington. Earlier, US Defense Secretary Mark Esper said Washington is trying hard to restart the talks. North Korea has ramped the pressure on the US to come up with a solution to their stalled negotiations before the end of the year. In Thailand, thousands of people protest in Bangkok against the government's move to ban the anti-establishment Future Forward Party. This is the biggest demonstration in the country since the coup in 2014. Future Forward Party leader Thanathorn said the March elections were manipulated in the army's favor. He said the people will no longer tolerate the current social conditions under the junta regime. The FFP leader said his party will again stage a protest next month. In Germany, a government report says nearly 200 Islamophobic crimes have occurred in the country in the third quarter of 2019. The report said 25 of the 188 attacks directly targeted mosques. The first report on Islamophobic attacks said a total of 132 attacks were recorded, but this figure later rose to 188. The Berlin-based Islamic Council chairman said there has been a rise in anti-Islam discourse in Germany. Tens of thousands of people are protesting in the Sardine movement against the far-right League leader Matteo Salvini in Italy's capital, Rome. Salvini was on trial for allegedly defaming the judiciary. The protesters are gathered in Piazza San Giovanni, holding placards to express a message of tolerance and anti-racism. The movement was triggered by regional elections to be held in January, where Salvini has a chance of seizing control. Opinion polls show the League and the incumbent centre-left Democratic Party are neck and neck. The U.S. has warned Iran of a decisive response if its personnel or partners are harmed in Iraq. In a statement, Secretary of State Mike Pompeo accused Tehran of firing rockets at a military base housing U.S. troops near Baghdad airport this week. Pompeo said Iran must respect the sovereignty of its neighbors. He said Tehran must immediately stop providing aid and support to third parties in Iraq and beyond. Turning to Lebanon, Pompeo said the U.S. will continue to support the Lebanese people in their fight against government corruption and terrorism. Earlier, the U.S. Treasury Department imposed new sanctions against two alleged Hezbollah money launderers and financiers. Malaysia says the U.S. sanctions imposed on Tehran violate the UN Charter and international law. Speaking at the Doha Forum, Prime Minister Mahathir Mohamad said Kuala Lumpur doesn't support the reimposition of sanctions against Tehran. Mahathir said Malaysia and other countries have lost a big market because of this embargo. The Prime Minister argued sanctions can only be applied by the UN in accordance with the Charter. Earlier on Wednesday, the U.S. announced a fresh round of sanctions against Iran, targeting its shipping network. Qatar says little progress has been made in resolving a 2.5-year-long dispute between Doha and its Gulf neighbors. This comes less than a week after a summit of Gulf states concluded in Riyadh. In an interview, Foreign Minister Sheikh Mohammed bin Abdurrahman Al Thani said little development has taken place in solving the issue. Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Bahrain and Egypt cut diplomatic and trade links with Qatar in 2017, accusing it of backing terrorism. Qatar denies the charge and accuses its neighbors of curtailing its sovereignty. Sudan's former president Omar al-Bashir has been sentenced to 2 years of detention in a reform facility. The court convicted al-Bashir of corruption and illegal possession of foreign currency. The final court session was heard in Khartoum on 16th of November, including testimonies by the government's Auditor General. The case against al-Bashir centered around suitcases filled with multiple currencies worth over $130 million found in his home. Bashir was overthrown following nationwide protests that lasted months and resulted in several deaths. The self-declared Turkish Republic of Northern Cyprus has allowed Ankara to use its Jasitkel airport for drones escorting drill ships. The move comes at a time when Turkey is at odds with Greece, Cyprus and Israel with the demarcation of exclusive economic zones in the eastern Mediterranean. In a statement, the Prime Minister said it is allowing activities of unmanned aerial vehicles to protect Turkey and the TRNC's legitimate rights and interests. The airport is located in the eastern coastal city of Magusa. Turkey is the guarantor nation for the Turkish Republic of Northern Cyprus. Ankara is currently engaged in hydrocarbon exploration activities in eastern Mediterranean with 2 drilling vessels. Khalifa Haftar's Libyan National Army claims it shot down a Turkish drone over the capital Tripoli. The strike comes after LNA confirmed it was making progress south of Tripoli, declaring its control of a military camp. LNA officials say the army advanced in multiple directions while moving towards Tripoli. Earlier, LNA chief Khalifa Haftar urged his forces to advance towards the center of the city for a decisive battle. Haftar said the time has come for the broad and total assault expected by every Libyan. The United Nations has warned 900,000 people in Libya will need humanitarian assistance next year. The UN Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs said this will require $115 million in funding. The UN body said internally displaced people, non-displaced conflict-affected people, and refugees are the most vulnerable in Libya's crisis. Clean drinking water, medical services, and safe housing have been affected in the country, especially for women and children. The UN office said refugees and migrants continue to suffer human rights violations, exploitation, and abuse. Libya has been battered by escalating violence, unrest, and political instability since the fall of Muammar Gaddafi in 2011. The UN has renewed the mandate for the agency supporting Palestinian refugees for another 3 years. The United Nations Relief and Works Agency has faced budgetary difficulties since the US stopped funding it with $160 million per year. The agency's mandate has been extended until the year 2023. It received 169 votes in its favor and 9 abstentions, while the US and Israel voted against it. Both Washington and Tel Aviv have accused the agency of mismanagement and anti-Israeli incitement. Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas praised the vote as a victory for international law and the rights of the Palestinian refugees. Pakistan has been unanimously elected as chair of the 63rd session of the UN Commission on Narcotic Drugs for the year 2020. The commission is governing body of the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime that implements the body's drug control conventions. The Foreign Ministry said Pakistan's permanent representative in Vienna, Ambassador Mansoor Ahmad Khan, will chair the session. The ministry said Pakistan's election reflects international community's confidence in the country's role in policy discourse on the global drug problem. Earlier in May, Pakistan was elected as a member of the Commission for a 4-year term starting from January next year. Pakistan has served on the Commission for 4 decades since its establishment. A heat wave and strong winds are fanning coastal bushfires, threatening property in Western Australia. Temperatures in the region have been hovering around 40 degrees Celsius, making it harder for firefighters to contain the blaze.
Forecasters say the country could experience its hottest day on record next week. They say the heatwave is also set to make its way east. The Bureau of Meteorology says temperatures are likely to exceed 40 Celsius in many areas from Wednesday. The current record of 50.7 Celsius was set on January 2nd, 1960 in the outback town of Oodnadatta in South Australia. Bushfires have killed at least 4 people across the east coast of Australia since November. The fires have burnt 2.5 million acres of farmland and bush. More than 400 homes have also been destroyed.
In the US, lovers of unusual can take a look at the country's largest ice maze to be found in the center of Washington, D.C. The huge labyrinth is made of pure clear ice. See more of the winter wonderland in this report.
Washington, D.C.'s city center is the place to find an ice-cold thrill for the eyes, the largest ice maze in the United States. It's an immersive exhibit built with 7-foot-high ice walls made of nearly 57,000 kilos of crystal clear frozen water. The 300 ice blocks are lit up with bright lights to complete the sense of being lost in a frozen labyrinth.
It was kind of cold, kind of warm in there. For a cold day, it's good to be inside. And it was pretty much easy for us, but we got some dead ends, but we made it through.
Though the winter weather forecast predicts 2 days of rain, organizers say the maze, which is under a tent, can withstand all kinds of weather, except perhaps a tornado.
No, me neither. It's totally unique. I think it's really cool. DC has been putting new things like the botanical garden. I think that's something new. I haven't seen it before. And then now the ice maze. I think it's really cool that there's more things to do in the city. Yeah.
Visiting the maze is free, although guests can donate to the Children's National Hospital through the Find Your Joy campaign. It will remain open to the public until tomorrow.
Well, Norway is one of the only a few countries in Europe with higher greenhouse gas emissions now than in 1990. As the world tries to slow global warming, a huge oil field is breathing new life into Norway's oil sector. More on this report.
Beneath these North Sea platforms lie dozens of billions of dollars worth of oil. The Johan Sverdrup field, run by Norwegian producer Equinor, pumps around 350,000 barrels of oil per day. Already the highest producing oil field in Western Europe, the company aims to almost double its daily production by 2023. While alarm over climate change and calls to curb fossil fuel production are mounting, this field guarantees the Nordic nation at least another 5 decades of oil production.
Based on our own assessment, also looking or listening to the IAA, the International Energy Agency, there will be need for hydrocarbons also in 2050. There will be less need.
Across 4 platforms, hundreds of people work to control the drilling and pumping. In a control room, monitors watch the production carefully. All activities on the field are powered by an undersea cable from Norway, sourced from clean hydropower.
Every barrel produced from Johan Sverdrup is 25 times lower carbon footprint compared to the global average. And that's important in a climate perspective.
While Norway backs green initiatives like subsidising electric cars and protecting rainforests, the government is allocating record numbers of oil and gas exploration permits, meaning the days of the oil industry and Johan Sverdrup far from over.
Another weather situation from around the globe. And that's all for now. For the latest updates, you can follow us on social media at Indus.news.